You.
You too.
This meeting is
Sorry about
being
that
recorded.
yesterday.
What's that?
Sorry about that yesterday.
Oh, no, seriously, no worries. It's, I, scheduling is definitely not my strength. It's not in my wheel of genius. So,
Yeah, hey, same. But I see there was like 21 people there. I hope you have just as many today, if not more.
yeah, I think we had a good showing yesterday. So I think some people were throwing ideas around of stuff that they knew about buying and selling a law firm, but we were all just like armchair experts. But now, yeah, we got the pro on. So we'll see if people were able to adjust their schedules. It seems like we'll have some folks joining, and we can kind of kick things off after. We'll give people like 2 or 3 minutes to join.
Lovely.
Awesome. Where are you based out of?
Atlanta.
Oh, nice. Kimberly,
Mhm.
you're in Atlanta, right? Nice.
Correct.
Sure am.
What kind of law do you do, Kimberly?
Corporate fractional general counsel and CFO work.
Gotcha.
I feel like you're both just wearing too many layers for Atlanta in the summer.
I, I'm
This is
always
a shirt, so
I'm always cold, and we're inside. It's not like I'm outside, but I did go for a walk with my dogs yesterday and my son, and like around 4 o'clock, and I'm wearing a long sleeve shirt and jeans, and he's like, "It is, too hot." I'm like, "Feel my hands, I'm freezing." So,
I guess it's good. It's a good adaptation to have when you're living
mhm,
there.
mhm.
Are you from Atlanta?
No, actually, I'm from Houston, Texas, where it's even hotter and more humid. So, you know,
Used to it.
so I love it. I love it.
Nice. We'll give people some time to trickle in. How did you get into this unique niche expertise?
Mm. So I had my own firm, of course, and in estate planning and elder law. And so many of my clients that we were doing long-term care asset protection planning for had businesses. So I had already become credentialed at exit planning, taking the courses and things like that to better help them. And then after I sold my firm in 2020 and I was working on a farm, my own farm, I had a colleague that reached out to me and asked if I wanted to buy her firm. And I told her promptly that I had a conflict of interest because I had sold mine and I, you know, couldn't compete. And so within about 15 minutes, I had asked her some questions and she's like, "Hey, you've asked me more questions in 15 minutes than my other advisor for the past year has asked. Do you do this?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." And so she was my first client, and we actually went under contract and sold all cash deal within 6 months. And so it was a beautiful first transaction. And then I went and got more credentials. And the thing is, I had been coaching lawyers since 2008 in the estate planning arena. And so many of them already knew me, and many of them were older than me. And so when I did this, they just kept reaching out and, started saying, "Hey, can you help me? I want to do what you did." Because I was 50 when I sold my firm. And so, at some point, I was farming and I was growing hemp to create CBD products for seniors because seniors are my passion. And at some point, you got to think to yourself, spending all your time to hawk $35 bottles of CBD, and then you've got attorneys who are willing to, value you more. And my core value, my core purpose, not my core value, but my purpose in life, as I look at the different things I've done over my life since I was 17, is really to help people live a better second half of life. And so this just fit right into that. And so I thought, okay, done with the farm work. Let's just focus on this 100% instead of treating it like my backup plan. It became the primary, and the farm, not even the backup anymore. So that's how.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a cool story. I imagine that like at least this is just my sort of outsider view. It seems like people are considering sort of these types of buying and selling or rolling up law firms much more today than they were in the past. Maybe that's just because a lot of people are getting to the point where they want to sell a firm that maybe they've built over the past 20, 30 years. But does it seem like this type of work is picking up?
I would say yes, absolutely. And in my observation, I would surmise that it's for a few different reasons. Number one is that certainly there's more education on it, just like this, this podcast. It's more awareness and education that it's even possible. When I sold my firm, I didn't really know it was possible. I just knew I had no other option because I had no money saved up,
Hmm.
and I wanted a transition, so I needed to sell it versus just close the doors. Secondarily, it it is now an option, which it became an option in like 1991 when the ABA wrote some rules about it. But prior to that, it really wasn't legal to sell a law firm. You could transition upon disability to your partner if you had one. You could certainly wind it down, but a true sale just wasn't permissible. So people just handed them off to their colleagues, their friends, and they were just grateful that somebody was going to take care of their clients. So with the change in the rules and the laws, and more education, those two things. And then the third thing, Brian, I think, is that people are the way we live our life is different than it was in the generations before us. We don't, I mean, look at it. People don't keep jobs for more than a year or two. If you own your own business, you do, but it's not like you have to be in one thing for 50 years. Like, the people who worked for Xerox and things like that. And so people are more willing to say, I'm not identified. My identity is not based on this one business that I owned or this one profession that I have. And I want more. I want different. And I'm giving myself permission that that's okay. And that's a big part of it, is saying, look, I went to law school. I spent all this money. I still have law school loans, maybe, and I still want to do something different. And it's okay. I can put the shame away. I can put the judgment of others away, and I can still live and chart my own course. So I see a lot of younger people selling their law firms after 5, 10, 20 years versus the older ones, not versus, but in addition to the older ones that have been doing it for 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, it's a good segue because I feel like we're all here to kind of understand the how, and sort of like the what it like, what goes into it, and sort of how these things are done. And I think the financials, I think we were talking a little bit about multiples yesterday as like a little armchair expert conversation. But I think we all just want to learn more about it because each one of us is involved or runs a small firm, and that's sort of what Hay Counsel is all about. We exist to help people grow, manage, and run their firms, and mostly for solos and small firm lawyers who hopefully one day, if they want to or desire, either sell their firm or buy another firm, or both. So I'm glad we have the expert on. I'll basically hand over the mic to you and let you run with it. And if anyone here has questions, you can either drop it in the chat, raise your hand. It's super casual around here. So I'll pass it on to you, Victoria.
Great. All right. Thanks. So in preparation for this, I wanted to make sure that, I'm addressing the audience properly. And so with that in mind, and knowing that a large amount of the community is solos and or small firms, I want to just start by saying that the methodology and everything is very different, whether you're a true solo versus a small firm versus a mid-sized firm. And we're not even going to talk about the large firms. And so what you're selling or buying is very different based on those categories, right? And so what I'd like to share first is if you're a true solo, what should you be looking at? What should the true expectation be? Because that's what really makes a transaction or a deal successful or not, is our expectations. And we can talk about multiples all day long, but it doesn't mean anything unless we have the right frame of reference based on if we're a solo, small firm, or mid-sized firm. Because candidly, multiples don't come into play when you're a solo. They just don't. And so I want to talk about solos first, but before I do, can I get a show of some sort of representation, even though there's only 2 people on camera, as to who's solos on here and who are smaller firms? Smaller firms being you have staff of some sort and maybe an associate or more. So do you know so you're a small firm, Kimberly? Okay.
Yeah, I'm a firm of 2 partners and 1 associate.
Okay, so small firm. Okay, so solo, small firm, 2 partners, paralegal, solo. Okay, so we got a good blend. All right, so I'm going to start by talking about solos first, and then we'll scale into small firm after that. I'll use the terms of things. So 5 attorneys, 5 staff. Okay, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. So when we are, what I wanted to do is bring to you guys the information as far as what would be the biggest impact for selling a solo firm, right? Because first and foremost, we got to get past the mindset that you just can't sell a solo firm. Because that's what's out there is I have nothing to sell. The whole firm is me. What would they be buying, right? And so what they're buying is the opportunity. They're buying, and it all comes down, for a true solo, it all comes down to the list of clients and referral sources you have, okay? And so I can say that all day long. People can say that, but what does it mean as far as the list? So first and foremost, how big is the list, right? Do you have 200 people or do you have 10,000 people, right? Because that's going to make a difference to a buyer. So let's just say we've got a decent size list, and decent size, let's just say, is 3,000. Okay. And then the question becomes, how hot is the list? Meaning, what do you do with these contacts that you've been accumulating because you've done services for these people? Do you just do the service and close the file and then continue to service new people and then close the file? Do you keep in touch with them at all by sending e-newsletters, sending in-print newsletters, calling them on a regular basis, or do you just wait for them to call me back? I hear from a lot of firms that, well, I don't have to do anything because they just always call me back and I always get more business from them. And while I'm talking right now, if y'all don't mind, just like you did a second ago, if y'all could enter what type of practice you have into the chat, I'm going to take a look at that, and then I can address specific types of practice as well as it comes to buying and selling. But the hotter the list, the more valuable it is. And so as an example, with regard to when I had my estate planning law firm, so I had an estate planning law firm for 18 years, estate planning / elder law for 18 years before I sold it. And so what we did with our list to keep it hot, not just warm, not lukewarm, but hot, 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 was we sent out a weekly email. We sent out a monthly print newsletter. And the newsletter wasn't just, hey, it's all about estate planning, or hey, don't you want to hire me? It was personal stories. They got to know me and they got to know my staff, not just me, but my staff. And that's why they kept coming back, is because they wanted to know more about us personally. So we were personal with our staff. Some people are against this philosophy, but I am 100% for this philosophy. And so I was friends with people on Facebook, and, for me, Facebook was everything before all these other things came around. And that's how some of my clients continued to stay up with me. And still, I sold my firm in 2020. still they keep up with me and they still reach out to me and things like that. So there was social media. And then we had a client, well, before I get to that, I'll get to now. We had a client maintenance program. And so clients that paid us a certain amount, either monthly or annually, we would call them on a quarterly basis just to check in and back, see what's going on in their life, see if anything's changed. Does it affect their plan? Is there a referral we can make to them to someone else, like a divorce lawyer or an auto mechanic or a chiropractor, whatever. So we stayed in relationship with them, which is different than having a transaction closing the file. We stayed in relationship. For those who were not on our client maintenance program, we would call everyone within the past year or two on an annual basis just to check in. And we were trying to see if they wanted to be, on our client maintenance program. For those on our client maintenance program, we also, in addition to calling quarterly, we also held special seminars just for them, so that, they felt special and they were getting benefit out of paying for us more than just in case you need updates, they're cheaper. So we've tried to find ways to have regular communication and meaningful communication. And I know some people will say, well, I don't want to, everybody's time is limited and I don't want to harass them and I don't want to do that. It's not harassment if you are providing good content that they benefit from and enjoy. So stories, personal stuff, things like that, they enjoy. So that's how we kept our list hot and updated. So their phone numbers and their emails and their addresses were updated. That's the other thing with a cold list. Great, you've got 20,000 names. That sounds incredible. But do any of them even live there anymore? Can I call them on the phone and get somebody, right? So the list and how hot it is very important. Now, the other thing is, I can feel you, especially solos that say, I don't have time for all that. I don't have time for all that. So the other thing is what is automated and what can be automated so that these things can happen and it's not taking all your time, because you need to spend time on actually servicing clients, getting clients and servicing clients. So what can be automated for the prior clients, right? Because that is ultimately also going to be giving you new clients. But it's the value that you're building for when you ultimately sell. So what can be automated, what's already automated, and work on that. And then lastly, what's the new opportunity to sell to those clients on that list, that prior client? So as an example, I was speaking with an estate planning lawyer firm that was looking to buy one of my clients' estate planning firms. And the buyer said to me, well, that list, there's like no opportunity to sell anything to them. It's not like estate planning clients come back. I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, do you do estate planning? Because I can tell you, at least in our firm, which also included elder law, there were 6 points of sale for every single client that came through if they started with the base will package first. You got your base wills. You can then upgrade at some point to revocable living trust. You can upgrade at some point to asset protection. You can upgrade at some point to guardianship if you need that. Then there's Medicaid planning or veterans benefits planning. Then there's probate at death. There's fiduciary services. I can't imagine how you couldn't make more off the same person in many ways. And so that's one of the things that a buyer is going to be looking for. And if you're looking to buy firms, is where's the opportunity to sell to the same list, right? And so now I'm going to look at your firms for a second and see what kind of firms you have. And so to me, corporate and commercial transaction and litigation, there's just repeat business there. I have a business. I need a lawyer over and over and over again because I keep screwing up and I keep, not doing the right thing with my employees or with my transaction, my contracts with people. Business transactions, same thing. Full service commercial regulatory firm in fintech crypto space. That's an ever changing world. They need you just to keep up with what is going on with the regulations and what they can do and what they can't do. Fractional legal tech startups, one thing I know about entrepreneurs, because I am one, is, and I'm not just one because I own this business and I owned a law firm before, but multiple businesses. True entrepreneurs, they don't just have one business. They have so many ideas and they just can't capitalize on them all. And they need someone to help not only rein them in, but make sure that they're doing it properly as well. So that's, over and over again, business right there. And let's see if there's any others that I can't see down here. So yeah. So the businesses that's harder would be like PI cases, criminal cases, although the recidivism rate is pretty high. So I'd say that would almost even be one that's multiple opportunities there. And then family law. Family law, while they may not come back for another divorce, but once you've gotten divorced first, the divorce rate even spikes after that for the second and third marriages. But there's continuing business there with regard to, for example, modifications of child support, modifications of alimony, things like that. So there is repeat business. So, PI is the hardest one. You're hopeful that your clients don't get hurt again and again. But anyway, so some firms lend themselves well to saying there's more opportunity within my list. Some firms operate well with, okay, well, how to make, you heard me say that in my firm, I had a client maintenance program. Not only does that keep that part of the list hot, I mean, it's talking like you're walking on coals on them because they're so hot, but it's also predictable income. And that's what buyers are buying. They want predictable income. So to the extent you can do that. So that's number one, all about the list. But for a true solo and everybody else, the list means nothing unless you have data that can support the list. And so what does that mean? The data that is so helpful, and maybe not people on this call, but the majority out there that I speak with, solos don't keep any data. They're just happy to keep the doors open because they're getting clients coming through it. But the data that sells a law firm is how many leads are you getting per month? So that's how many times is the phone ringing, or are you getting pings through your website because you've automated that, or, however you get your leads. Track it. How many per month per source? Then from the leads, how many consultations are actually being scheduled and had? And then from the consultations, how many sales do you make? So we're charting our conversion rate as well. So the numbers and then the conversion rate. And then beyond that, what are your fees? Buyers want to know, are you charging market rate, below market rate, above market rate? And ultimately, what's your average case value? Because one thing that I hear from buyers regularly is that, man, that lawyer's only charging $325 an hour. And we're at like $500 an hour. Or like in estate planning, oh my gosh, you're charging $1,200 for a revocable living trust plan. I can't even sit down with somebody for that. We charge $4,500 for a revocable living trust plan. Or it would be, they're charging $4,500 for that. We only charge like $1,500 for that. And they can't wrap their brains around how they can make so much. And so that buyer might actually sabotage, that firm later because they have a bigger money block than maybe the seller does. So knowing that information and being aligned is helpful. So at the end of the day, when we're solos and we're selling, we're trying to sell from the buyer's perspective. And if you're looking to buy a solo from your perspective, what the buyer is looking at is they're looking at the firm kind of like, this is a marketing option for me, because it all comes down to the list, right? And so where's the opportunity in the list? So I can choose to spend my money on pay-per-click or Google ads or whatever people do these days to spend money on marketing. Or I can buy this firm and spend my money there. And so how we look at that then is, if you've got 1,000 leads, and if the average cost per lead to acquire a new client is $35 times 1,000, that'd be $35,000 that this firm is worth. Now that would go up or down depending on how cold or hot the list is. And that's why you need to know how cold or hot the list is. Because if I haven't touched these 1,000 people in the past 10 years, well, then now maybe I'm willing to spend $5 per lead, per name. And so that's 5,000 instead of 35,000. But if you're in regular contact and you can show me that they return time after time and I've got more opportunity because they all bought wills and now I'm going to sell them as revocable trust, I might be willing to spend $50 per lead on that. And so that's $50,000. So, I'm going to pause here and, engage in conversation and see what y'all think about all of that. And if it's in line with anything y'all talked about yesterday, before we go on to talk about small firms. Anybody?
I'm going to ask a question because I had a flare or something fly by and was distracting me for just the last minute when you were talking about numbers. It sounded to me like you said that essentially they're paying on a cost per lead, and that's essentially what they would buy your firm for. Did I get that right?
When we're a solo firm with essentially no staff and all we have is the list, that is what you're buying for the most part.
Okay.
That's how to
So
look
it'd
at
be
it.
kind of like the same pricing scheme for buying a newsletter or a podcast or something. You're essentially buying an audience.
Absolutely. That's exactly what you're doing. Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Victoria, I read a book. I actually read it with my wife because she runs an entirely different business, but in the service space. She's a professional home organizer, and we were reading a book I think it's called Built to Sell. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
I have.
It talks a lot about the risk of when you are like a one-person business, essentially, or just a small business in general, that a lot of your goodwill is tied to your name and to sort of like you as a person. And so there's a lot of risk when you go to sell it that somebody looks at your business and says, well, this is just you. People trust you. And when you leave, everything, including like the way you run the business and your brain, leaves too. And the risk is obviously higher the smaller the business is. And so the book really teaches you to turn everything that you do into a process, turn the business into a brand and not just your name. So a lot of, I think, the learnings that we both got, we actually implemented this more with her business than my business, but it was like changing the name from one that is her name to a generic brand name, and then starting to systematize everything and do things like you're talking about, nurture your leads, make sure they're warm, make sure you have like constant communications and that you're improving your repeat customers. So it sounds like that's like every solo shop or small firm is not the same. The ones that really position themselves as systems and processes and brands versus a person with a book of business is going to sell better. Is that right?
That is correct. Not only will they sell better because they're more desirable at that point, but they will sell for more money because they're more valuable. So when we're selling a business, there's two components. One is, what am I worth? And the other is, does anyone want that? Okay. And so let me just relate it to dating, if you will. I could be single and I have $1 million in the bank. I am attractive, all the things. But when I speak to you, I'm a complete asshole. When, we're engaging in conversation, I'm looking somewhere else and I'm not, I'm eating and my mouth's all open and everything. I'm not desirable, even though maybe I'm valuable. I got all the things to check the box financially, but I'm not desirable to somebody. So we got to have both components, right? We have to have both components. And the more you have, which is exactly where I was going to go when we talk about small firms, is the more you have that looks like a business, the more valuable and more desirable you are. And so the more systems you have. And so as an example, and sorry to keep saying estate planning, but it's just always the easiest example. But, and what I'm most familiar with, of course, but is like there's software programs out there that you can input data, it drafts the will for you. I can teach my legal assistant how to input data and it'll draft it for me. Things like that. Whereas I still meet lawyers who do estate planning that they draft everyone from scratch. Like they have their own template, but it's not a software system. So they have to go in and change things every single time. And it's not easy to train, and it's certainly not scalable, right? So it's not a system. It's a template that you change every time you do a new one. So systems, written processes, or at least recorded processes. So if I'm going to, draft a contract, and we do this kind of contract all the time, and even though I have a software system that helps me, still I should have a written process, checklist, and or video that shows the next person how to do this. Because if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, who's going to show that person? If I buy this firm from you and I step in and I don't have experience in all the little things you've done, how do I learn that, right? I have to teach myself. Well, I'm not going to buy a business if I just have to teach myself. I'll just go start my own business and teach myself, right? So written processes or recorded processes. And the other is automations. With all the tools we have available to us now, literally someone calls my phone, I can now push a button in my software system, and for the next 3 months, they get an email every other day saying, hey, where'd you go? Why didn't you hire me? Or whatever I want it to say, right? Which can really expand our reach and things like that. So what's automated within your systems? We can automate intake. Well, we can automate marketing. We can automate intake and post-sale conversations and production, especially like in family law and things like that, where the relationship lasts a long time before anything is complete. Automations once a month saying, hey, we're still working on your case. What's the number one reason why people get sanctions by the bar? Because we don't communicate enough. So how can we automate these kinds of stuff? And then if we can scale and we're willing to hire anybody, support staff can also make it does make firms more valuable and desirable, because buyers often don't want to walk in and be the person doing the work. They want to buy, maintain everything the way it is, and just profit. And that's why even having an associate or two is much more sellable, much more desirable than someone coming in and the attorney has lots of good staff, but they don't have any other attorneys. Well, the buyer has to be that attorney, or they have to hire an attorney, kind of thing. So the more business-like you look, then the more valuable and the more desirable somebody wants to buy you. The more book of business you have, and that's all you have, then the more marketing mindset, I'm paying for a marketing tool, essentially, that we would have to have. So I'll stop there again and pause and see what kind of comments.
So you mentioned earlier that solos, like multiples, don't even come into play. So, what's the value that we're associating with what we're purchasing?
So the list, for sure. Any kind of traffic on your website, phone number. That's why the data is so important. How many calls do you get per month or whatever? And then ultimately, what as a solo can expect to receive in history, as well as even now, most often, a solo with no staff can expect to basically, maybe you can negotiate some dollars for the list. So let's say it's $20,000 for the list, phone number, website. And then you're negotiating what percentage of revenue share will you get over a period of time. The most common right now that I hear and see is between 10 and 30% of revenue that comes in over 2 to 3 years based on your list, based on your referrals that are coming into your phone number or hitting your website. So that's most common that I see right now.
Yeah, I have a question. So I've been looking at a couple of solo practices that have been listed for sale, and they're kind of they have different characteristics, but one of them is a guy who's retiring. And how would you say that someone who is retiring versus someone who could easily just continue practicing somewhere else or in some other capacity, how would you say that affects a buyer or should affect a buyer's view of that business?
Well, I don't think it makes any difference. And the reason is this: most states, not all states, but most states, under the ABA model rules, if they follow those, they prohibit the person who's selling their practice or a part of their practice to continue to practice in that area. So as an example, let's use a firm that does family law and also estate planning. They can sell their family law and keep the estate planning, and they can continue to practice estate planning, but they cannot in their state do family law anymore because their state law prohibits them from doing what they sold. If they sold the whole thing, they wouldn't be able to do estate planning or family law in their state. Now you can negotiate, like when I sold, so in Georgia, it's prohibited, but I negotiated with my seller that where my farm was 2.5 hours away, I could still do estate planning where my farm was because our firm, our law firm, did not expand that far out, and she didn't care. I wasn't competing with her. So and if somebody's getting an SBA loan to buy this firm, the SBA prohibits competition. And so you look at your state law first and foremost. Second, you negotiate the non-compete. How long is it going to be? 2 years, 5 years, forever? What are the borders of that? Is it the whole state, or is it just, within the, like in Atlanta, we put the 12 normal counties of, the surrounding Atlanta metro area. So you can negotiate that. And the reason why it doesn't make any difference to me whether they're retiring or not is they can say they're retiring, and if they could have an opportunity to compete, they still can. They're just, and maybe they do intend to retire, but maybe after, 6 months on the golf course, they're like, man, I'm bored, and all my friends have just died because they've all retired. And so I want to get back into doing what I was doing. And so I don't put any weight in what people say they want to do after done practicing. I contract for it. You can't do this and that in this area for this amount of time, period, the end. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right. So when we're selling small law firms and mid-sized firms, multiples do become a factor at that point. And I'm going to start off with, first and foremost, most or many buyers have never bought a law firm before. And so they don't know what they're looking for either. They don't know what they should be looking for. They hire lawyers who do closing documents and maybe can help with due diligence, but those lawyers really don't know how to value a law firm. And they themselves have never sold their own law firm or bought a law firm. And they get caught up in the same rhetoric that everyone else does, is it's a service business and it's based on you, therefore it's not worth much. CPAs also have that same philosophy when they're valuing our firm sometimes. I mean, it's very different than other service businesses and stuff like that. But the more we make it like a business, the more that it shouldn't be that same philosophy anymore. And so, number one, when you're looking at the value of a business, you want to make sure you're using someone who regularly values law firms and compares them with, other law firm sales, not just what you see listed on sites that list businesses like Biz Buy Sell. I mean, when we do valuations, we of course pull those up as far as listings because our clients want to know. And they're looking at them. So we just put it right out there and say, okay, well, these are the firms that are listed for sale that are similar to yours. This is what the multiples they're using. Some of them are, reasonable, and some of them are just crazy. They're never going to sell that firm. And some of them are way under, you know, they're just trying to get, you know, just dump it. It's a fire sale. But what we do is we actually look at real law firms that have been sold and funded all in cash or partially in cash through the SBA. Also know that when you're getting a cash deal, you should expect to give them a discount versus if you expect versus if you're willing to share the risk and self-finance some or all of it over time. The more you hold the note, the more you self-finance and are willing to do that, then the higher the price should be. The more they're coming with cash, the lower the price should be, because when they come with cash, they are taking on all the risk. Now, I even hate to use the word risk. Brian used the word risk earlier, and I cringe, because when a business is good and solid, the only risk is whether you can manage it and lead it and take it to new heights, right? I mean, the risk should be on the buyer, because if the seller can show through data and history and experience that, so for example, let me give an example. I had an employment law firm that we sold, and it made essentially over $1 million every single year for the past 5 years. Over $1 million, didn't change ever. Same staff, which was 2.5 attorneys for those 5 years. No other staff than that. The profit margin was approximately 60% all 5 years. They had no systems, they had no processes. It was highly, the relationships were very much on the owner. And so, the buyer's like, hey, I mean, if everybody leaves, and I can't predict that you can make $1 million still. I'm like, well, actually you can. I mean, she's done it year after year after year. What is predictable is that the cash flow is going to go down 10%. That's what the SBA uses as a marker, is that we should expect in the first year to go down 10%, but then it bounces back after that. If you do the transition right, then there shouldn't be a whole lot of loss of any of those things that buyers are concerned about. So in this particular case, the buyer, who had never owned their own law firm before, but had been working at a bigger corporate firm, wasn't even licensed in the state, wasn't even living in the state, got licensed there, moved there, was the opposite gender of the seller, and the opposite race. So we're not even talking about someone who could even pretend to step in the same shoes and look the same. Comes and buys this business and paid 80% cash up front. So it was over $1 million cash up front, and then 20% note that the seller held on to for I think a 3-year period. And so did they lose some business? Maybe a little, but 1 year later, the same buyer is now buying another employment firm in the same state, almost same demographics and everything as far as the owner goes, and still looking to pay all that cash up front. Why? Because the business was solid. And I also had a very strong conversation with him in the very beginning. If you don't trust yourself, if you can't lead and manage, then don't even look at this business. Don't look at any business, because you're not ready. If you're talking risk on the other side, then do your due diligence. If there's true risk, walk away. If you're the risk, then walk away. But if it's a solid business and you're a solid leader and manager, then buy the business all day, every day. Or buy the list and know that it's a marketing tool all day, every day. And use the marketing tool, right? Now, I have seen also where buyers will come in and they'll buy the list. They'll buy the firm, the list, and then they don't do anything with it. And then it's like, oh, this, firm sucks. The firm doesn't suck. Your effort post the sale sucked, right? And sorry, you said we were a little relaxed. Sorry, I'm just a little straight. So when it comes to seeing how it is, and we all have a responsibility. The responsibility of the seller was to provide accurate information so you as a buyer can determine whether this business makes sense for you. But it's your responsibility after you buy a business to then make it successful. The seller's not responsible anymore. They got it to that point. And so that's why I have, I guess, a chip on my shoulder about risk and who's got the risk. And, oh, I want to share the risk. Well, step up, step up. So what else can I answer for you guys?
I was curious to hear more about how the valuation of the small firm model.
So, so when we do evaluation, and they're all over the place, and there's, there's like 8 different models of doing evaluation. There's income, there's assets, there's, market comparison, all the things. I know that when we do our evaluations, we do a much more in-depth one than we see otherwise, that is based strictly on historical income. Okay. Historical income is certainly helpful. It can show the predictability of what's to come in the future. But when we do our evaluations, we do all the income stuff, of course. Then we actually will compare with, as I said before, firms that have sold, so that we can find, and not just firms that have sold, but based on the size of the revenue, the size of the net income, and the size of what's called seller's discretionary earnings. That's everything that goes in the owner's pocket, even if for tax purposes it looks like an expense, right? Because you'll hear multiples on EBITDA, earnings before income, depreciation, amortization, all the stuff. That may be, let's say, $100,000. Your EBITDA is $100,000, and you'll hear that multiples are 3 times EBITDA. Well, then there's seller's discretionary earnings. And if I have flowed through my health insurance, my life insurance, my car, my kids are on payroll, my spouse is on payroll and they're not really doing anything, all my travel expenses, and 80% of those are actually personal, that I attached on when I was at a conference or whatever. So seller's discretionary earnings, let's say, for example, is $300,000. Well, a multiple on seller's discretionary earnings is usually less than the multiple on EBITDA, but overall, it gives you a better value. So let's say the multiple on seller's discretionary earnings is 2 times. 2 times 3 is 600,000. 3 times 1 is 300,000. So, so we take all of that into account. And then you'll also hear a 1-time multiple, or 50% to 1.5 times multiple on gross revenues. And I heard from a client the other day, I've heard it goes like over 5 years. Where do you hear this? But anyway, so, often when we just look at those 3 matrix and the multiples that are common on all 3, you could have a valuation that's like, $500 to $2 million, right? Because I have firms that make $2 million, but their net is nothing. And so a multiple on nothing is nothing. And then a 1 times on gross is like $2 million. So we have to dig deeper. We have to look at other things. And so we're going to look at firms that have been sold that are same size, same SDE, same EBITDA. We're going to look, or similar. We're going to look at your reviews on Google and, the BBB and all the things. So we're looking at your goodwill and your reputation. We're looking at the predictability, the systems and the processes you have. We're looking at the team you have. All of that, when we do evaluation, has a play in it, and then we give you a range of number, right? And then we also look at future possibilities of income should things continue to go the way they have been going. Or, for example, this firm spends nothing on marketing, but if you infuse the average of what firms spend on marketing, so between 5 to 10% of gross revenue, then what should that do for your income, and therefore what should that do for the value? Now, that doesn't mean that we increase the value based on what should be, but we certainly highlight that for a buyer as to what could be. So we're looking for the opportunity there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
We also, in my firm, we also look at where the firm is located and what service type it is. So, for example, one of you works with entrepreneurs. We would look at your city and your place, and we would do the demographic search and say, how many entrepreneurs or new business owners are in your state? what's the opportunity there? And we assign a value to that. Like, so if I'm doing elder law and I'm in Florida and it's still increasing by 36% of old people, over the age of such and such every year, that's a positive for me. That increases the value of my firm, or at least the desirability. So how much of it is storytelling? Firms aren't commodities, so it's about the value of your firm and unique buyer. Systems, firm brand, current revenue. You're buying this amazing system. Yeah, I mean, when we represent firms to sell, we're certainly putting their first, their best face forward, right? And we're showing what all the great things are and where the opportunities are. And so, like, where the opportunities are, for example, I had a firm that I said, what are the things that you naturally could be doing within your firm from a services standpoint that you could offer, but you're not because you don't want to hire the staff or you don't want to do whatever, but yet it's so natural for your type of firm to do this. What are those things, right? Because we want to say to a buyer, we don't do this, but you could do this as well. And here's more opportunity. So, I mean, we're all lawyers. We all have, yes, I mean, especially litigators that get in front and have to tell the story to sell. That's part of it. And that's why due diligence is so important on the buyer side. Buyers go in with this opportunity. Oh, I'm going to buy this firm and it's going to change my life. Do your due diligence, because sometimes it does change your life, but not in the way you hope it does, unless you've done the right due diligence. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I see firms all day. I see firms all day long. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, I wouldn't touch this one. And then there's others that are like, how quickly can I buy this if I had the opportunity? You know what I'm saying? All right, Jeff, go ahead.
No, you're good. I appreciate all this. This is great information. And I don't want to die anything, but I've got 2 quick questions, I think. Are you seeing recurring revenue models impact valuations at all? That's one. And then 2, where do we go to if we want to look at buying businesses like this?
So I am a huge fan of client maintenance programs, and it does increase the value, depending on how much you have, how many clients there are, things like that. Recurring revenue is predictable, and so it does increase the value. So I'll just say that. Where do you go? You go to people like me that represent sellers, or you go to Biz Buy Sell, and just do that. You can put ads in your bar journals or wherever your bar publications are that says, I'm looking to buy blah, blah. A lot of sellers don't want to put their information in because they don't want people to know they're selling, because they're afraid that, it's going to tank their firm. So if you do that, I would include a sentence that says, reach out to me, I'll be discreet, and, sign a non-disclosure agreement from the beginning. So that way they feel comfortable reaching out. That's what I would do if I was a lawyer. If I was looking for a firm. Can we talk about financing? Absolutely. So the traditional ways to finance, first and foremost, I'm a big proponent of the SBA loan and getting an SBA loan to buy a law firm, and certainly to sell. If I'm on the sell side, because I get all my cash up front if I'm selling, or at least 80% or more up front. If I'm buying, I want to do that if I know this is a solid business and I know I can at least maintain or scale it, because I don't want to be tied to the seller forever. I don't want to be sending them checks all the time and them looking over my shoulder and all that. I want a clean break. Now, sometimes there is seller financing. And so seller financing would be they're holding a note. And so there's 2 ways. I prefer the one where I always prefer where there's a set price for the firm. We have agreed on the price, and I'm going to pay you over time, either same amount every month, regardless what the firm does, or based on revenue. So I sold a firm for $400,000. It was estate planning. Sold a firm for $400,000. The buyer paid $100,000 up front. The seller held a note for $300,000. And on this particular one, there was no timing. It was just basically, I'm going to pay you 30% of gross revenues over time until the extra $300,000 has been paid off. So that could be 2 years from now. That could be 8 years from now. And quite candidly, I thought this was a great deal because we had a married couple getting out. They had 1.5 staff members that were both very questionable as to whether they should even be, still working today. And so and their finances were just a shambles. So, the buyer was really just buying the list. but yet we had come up with 400,000, 100 down, and revenue over time. And I thought that was a great deal for this situation. For mine, I sold it for a set value. I had 6-figure lump sum at closing, 6-figure lump sum 30 days later, and then I had 18 months of the same amount every single month for 18 months on mine, regardless how the firm did, right? So that's another way to do it. I've sold one where one of the very first ones I helped sell, this guy had been with the firm for like 15 years, started off as a law clerk, went to law school, became a lawyer, running the firm. So 100% seller note, 100% seller note, and she loaned him money to buy new furniture, and she loaned him money to buy the building that she was selling as well. So she did all the loaning, and he came up with nothing up front, and it's doing very well. They're all doing very well. So there's then when you're selling to an associate, sometimes people just give shares away instead of their bonuses, or instead of a higher salary, start giving shares, or they come up with a valuation and they start selling incremental shares over time until they hit what amount they want. If I'm a buyer and I come in and I'm not part of the firm and I own my own firm, I can get an SBA loan for essentially 100%. But if I'm an associate and I'm buying up as a partner, or I'm buying up to own the whole thing, I have to at least have been a partner for 1 or 2 years. Otherwise, I have to put up at least 10%, right? And so sometimes the owner will give the 10%, they'll wait a year or two, whatever it is, and then they'll let them buy and get the SBA loan at 100%. So there's lots of different variations. Brian, if there's any specific question you have, I'd be happy to answer that. What's the Dave Ramsey model?
I have one question, Victoria. When you represent buyers, do you represent buyers? Is it basically like a real estate broker where you just charge a fixed fee, or how does your fees work?
So when I represent buyers, it's only after they have already identified the firm they want to purchase. And then what we do is we help you assess the value of it and negotiate the buying terms and stuff like that. I used to represent buyers from the beginning, except they don't know what they want. And then I still have a salary of all the people that are helping me trying to find you the perfect firm. And for whatever reason, you just keep saying you don't like it, you don't like it, you don't like it. So I stopped doing that. I'm making an exception right now with a very large firm that knows exactly what they want, and they're paying me $20,000 up front, and then they're paying me $5,000 success fee when we get them the right firm. But I'm making an exception for them. Usually you have to have the firm already in your sights, and then we help you with the valuation and the negotiation of it. As far as selling, we charge $7,500 for evaluation. We charge $7,500 to set up and get ready to position you to sell, and then we charge an 8% success fee at the end, unless you are a partnership, especially with a spouse, and we're helping you sell. Then we charge 10% because y'all are high maintenance. And I'm doing a 3-series podcast that I'm recording right after this call on working with partners, and it's challenging. So you'll always know where you stand with me, Kimberly, huh?
It's so true. Partners can make an easy deal complicated very fast.
Yeah. So, and
John, I have one quick question is more related to your services, and then I'll wrap it up because it's been a really solid hour. It's crazy how fast these hours go, especially when the person is dropping knowledge. John asked, do you support firms looking to purchase others in Massachusetts?
I do. We work in the entire United States. And so, yes, if you found a firm you want in Massachusetts, we would help support you in that, as long as we're not representing the seller. because I don't do both at the same time. And so often, so often I will say this: people who are looking to buy, sometimes they don't hire us, but what they, like in the beginning, because we won't let them. But you can always reach out to us and say, look, I'm looking for these kind of firms. If they come across your desk, or if you represent anyone in this kind of stuff, let me know. I want to be on your list of buyers, right? And so you're not my client, but you're on a list that we would go to first if we had the right kind of profile and the right kind of firm. And on my website, quidproquolaw.com, we do list the firms that we have for sale on there. So if there's any on there that you're like, hey, I'd like to explore that, send us a comment on the website, and Jordan, my guy, will reach out to you and say, what are you interested in? So let's see if we can match.
I was gonna ask, just before we wrap up, if there's any sort of resources that you have that you share with prospective clients, things that I'm sure you have a way of keeping leads warm as well. But maybe there's some materials that you want to float with our group that I can share, and also contact information. It seems pretty easy to find you, but if you want to drop like any sort of blurb that I can share with the community, which is at this point getting close to 300 active members. I'd love to be able to share your information and give people some valuable information as well.
Right. Yes, I can email you something, Brian. And also I do have a private Facebook group, which is where most of my community is, that we talk to regularly. It's called The Art of Buying and Selling Law Firms on Facebook. And then my podcast is Smart Lawyers Position to Transition. So, and it drops every Thursday.
Amazing. You are a force, Victoria. Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate y'all being here today. Sorry about yesterday.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, Jeff, we'll get all the information. I'll get the podcast. Victoria, I'll just follow up via email, get all the information that you would want to share. And I'd love to have you back on. Maybe we can do something recurring for this group and keep kind of building out the audience here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people interested in this as we continue to grow.
Great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate all the good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The recording